The diner smelled like burnt coffee and old grease, the kind of scent that clung to clothing and hair long after a shift ended. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late September, and the autumn light filtered through the smudged windows in pale, diluted streams that barely reached the back booths. The vinyl seats were cracked and patched with duct tape, the linoleum floor worn down to its underlayer in the high-traffic areas near the register. This was the Bluebell Diner, a relic from another era that somehow continued existing on the outskirts of Millbrook, a town that had seen better decades. Maya Rodriguez moved between tables with practiced efficiency, her movements economical and precise. She was 23 years old, though her eyes carried something older, something weary that didn't match her relatively young face. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and she wore the standard uniform, a pale blue dress with white trim and a name tag that said Maya in faded letters. She'd worked at the Bluebell for 18 months now, ever since she'd arrived in Millbrook with nothing but a duffel bag, $300 in cash, and a determination to disappear into the anonymity of small-town obscurity. If you're enjoying this story so far, it would mean the world if you could take just a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us continue bringing you these stories. Now, let's get back to Maya's day that's about to change everything. The lunch rush had ended an hour ago, leaving only scattered customers. A truck driver hunched over the counter nursing his fourth cup of coffee, two teenagers sharing a plate of fries in the corner booth, and an elderly woman who had just been seated by the window. Maya grabbed a laminated menu from the stack near the kitchen pass-through and approached the new customer with the same neutral smile she'd perfected over countless shifts. "Good afternoon," Maya said, setting the menu down. "Can I start you off with something to drink?" The woman looked up, and something happened in that moment that Maya couldn't quite define. The woman's face, lined and soft with age, framed by silver hair styled in careful waves, went absolutely still. Her mouth opened slightly, and her hand, which had been reaching for the menu, froze in midair. Her eyes, a striking blue that age hadn't dimmed, locked onto Maya's face with an intensity that made the air between them feel suddenly electric. Maya felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. She'd gotten good at reading people over the years, at sensing when someone was about to cause trouble or when a situation might turn dangerous. This felt different. This felt like standing on the edge of something vast and unknowable. Are you all right, ma'am?" Maya asked, her professional mask slipping slightly. The woman's lips moved, forming words that didn't immediately come. Her chest rose and fell with rapid, shallow breaths. One hand clutched at the edge of the table, knuckles whitening. The other pressed against her chest, over her heart, as if she could physically hold something inside that was trying to escape. "You," the woman whispered, her voice cracking. "You look just like my missing granddaughter." The words hung in the air like smoke. Maya felt something cold slide down her spine, a sensation she'd learned to associate with danger, with the past trying to reach forward into the present. She took a small step backward, her trained instinct screaming at her to run, to get out, to protect the carefully constructed walls she'd built around her new life. But before she could respond, before she could offer the practiced deflection she'd used countless times when people thought they recognized her from somewhere, the woman's face went pale, not gradually but all at once, like someone had pulled a plug and drained all the blood from her features. Her eyes rolled back slightly, and she swayed in her seat. "Ma'am?" Maya dropped the professional distance immediately, reaching forward just as the woman's body went slack. The elderly woman slumped sideways, her shoulder hitting the window with a dull thud before Maya caught her, easing her down across the booth seat. "Someone call 911. The diner erupted into motion. Pete, the cook and day manager, burst through the kitchen doors, phone already in hand. The truck driver at the counter spun around on his stool. The teenagers abandoned their fries and crowded closer, phones out, already recording. "Back up, give her air." Pete barked at the kids, shooing them away while pressing the phone to his ear. "Yes, we need an ambulance at the Bluebell Diner on Route 47. Elderly woman collapsed unconscious." Maya knelt beside the booth, her fingers finding the woman's wrist, feeling for a pulse. It was there, thready and fast, but present. The woman's face had gone from pale to an alarming gray, and her breathing was shallow, labored. Maya tilted the woman's head back slightly, making sure her airway was clear, her own hands surprisingly steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "Stay with me," Maya murmured, though she wasn't sure if the woman could hear her. "Help's coming. Just hold on." The woman's purse had fallen to the floor during her collapse, its contents spilling across the worn linoleum. A leather wallet, reading glasses and a hard case, a small bottle of pills, tissues, and, Maya's breath caught, a photograph. It had landed face up, and even from her position on the floor, Maya could see it clearly. The photo showed a young girl, maybe 9 or 10 years old, with dark hair and eyes, wearing a school uniform and smiling at the camera. But it wasn't the girl in the photo that made Maya's world tilt slightly on its axis. It was the woman standing beside the child in the photograph, younger by perhaps 20 years, but unmistakably the same person now lying unconscious in the booth. And the child had Maya's eyes. The same shape, the same slightly upturned corners. The same small beauty mark just above the left eyebrow. Pete crouched beside Maya, pressing a clean bar towel into her hands. "In case she's bleeding anywhere. The ambulance is 3 minutes out." He glanced at Maya's face and frowned. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Maya blinked, tearing her gaze away from the photograph. "I'm fine. She said something weird right before she collapsed." "People say all kinds of weird things," Pete said pragmatically. He was 58, with gray stubble and permanent grease stains on his apron, and in the 18 months Maya had worked for him, he never asked her a single personal question beyond what was necessary for employment paperwork. It was one of the reasons she'd stayed. Probably confusion, right before the medical event. Happens with stroke sometimes. But Maya couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't confusion. The way the woman had looked at her, it hadn't been the glazed, unfocused stare of someone whose brain was misfiring. It had been recognized. Clear, sharp, devastating recognition. The ambulance arrived with sirens that seemed too loud for the quiet afternoon. 2 paramedics rushed in with practiced urgency, and Maya stepped back, giving them room to work. They checked vitals, asked Pete questions about what had happened, loaded the woman onto a stretcher with efficient movements. One of them picked up the spilled contents of her purse, including the photograph, and tucked everything back inside before setting the bag on the stretcher beside the woman. "Anyone know her name?" the younger paramedic asked. "Any family we should contact?" Pete shook his head. "First time she's been here, far as I know." The paramedic opened the woman's wallet, checking for ID. "Eleanor Whitmore. Address is local, Sycamore Lane." He looked around the diner. "Really, no one knows her?" Maya felt Pete's eyes on her, questioning, but she kept her expression neutral. She didn't know Eleanor Whitmore. She couldn't know her. Knowing people, being known, those were luxuries she couldn't afford. As the paramedics wheeled the stretcher toward the door, Eleanor Whitmore's eyes fluttered open for just a moment. Her gaze, unfocused and confused, swept across the diner before landing on Maya. Her lips moved, forming a single word that Maya couldn't hear over the commotion but could read clearly on her lips. "Sophia." Then she was gone, loaded into the ambulance, and the diner fell back into uneasy quiet. Maya stood frozen near the booth, that name echoing in her head like a bell she couldn't unring. Sophia. She hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in 14 years. 14 years since she'd been anyone but Maya Rodriguez, waitress, nobody, invisible. "You sure you're okay?" Pete asked, studying her with more attention than she was comfortable with. "You handled that real well. You got medical training or something?" "Just basic first aid," Maya said, which was true enough. What she didn't say was that she'd learned it during a stint at a group home when she was 15 from a nurse who'd volunteered there and had taken an interest in the quiet girl who never talked about where she came from. I should clean up the booth." She grabbed cleaning supplies from the back and returned to the window booth, scrubbing at nothing, just needing something to do with her hands. The photograph was gone, tucked back in Eleanor Whitmore's purse, but Maya could still see it perfectly in her mind's eye. That little girl. Those familiar eyes. The truck driver paid his bill and left. The teenagers finished their fries and departed, already posting videos of the incident to whatever social media platforms they preferred. The diner returned to its usual afternoon lull, just Maya and Pete, and the hum of the ancient refrigeration units, and the tick of the wall clock that was always 7 minutes fast. Maya wiped down tables that were already clean. She refilled salt shakers that didn't need refilling. She did everything she could to keep her mind occupied, to push away the questions that were bubbling up like water from a spring she'd thought she'd buried years ago. When her shift finally ended at 6, she walked the 3 blocks to her apartment, a studio above a dry cleaner that smelled perpetually of chemicals and heat. She climbed the narrow stairs, unlocked the door, and stood in the center of her small space, surrounded by the minimal possessions she'd accumulated: a mattress on the floor, a small table with 1 chair, a hot plate, a mini fridge, clothes in a duffel bag because she'd never bought a dresser. Everything she owned could fit in her car, a 15-year-old Honda Civic, in under 10 minutes. That was by design. Always be ready to leave. That was the rule she'd lived by since she was 17. But instead of packing, instead of following her instincts and running like she'd run from 3 other towns over the past 6 years, Maya found herself sitting on her mattress, laptop open, typing a name into the search bar: Eleanor Whitmore, Millbrook. The results loaded slowly on her cheap internet connection. Local newspaper archives, historical society mentions, a few social media profiles. Maya clicked through them methodically, building a picture of a woman she'd never met, but who had somehow recognized her in a diner on a Tuesday afternoon. Eleanor Whitmore, 74 years old. Widow. Her husband, Robert Whitmore, had died 6 years ago. She'd lived in Millbrook her entire life, taught 2nd grade at Millbrook Elementary for 37 years before retiring. Active in the community, church volunteer, member of the Historical Society. And Maya's fingers stilled on the trackpad, grandmother to 1 granddaughter, Sophia Grace Whitmore, who had disappeared 14 years ago at the age of 9. Maya's apartment suddenly felt too small, the walls pressing in. She stood up, paced to the window, looked out at the darkening street below. A missing granddaughter. 14 years. The same amount of time Maya had been someone else, somewhere else, anyone but who she used to be. She opened a new search. Sophia Grace Whitmore missing. The results flooded the screen. Newspaper articles from September 2011. Local girl disappears after school. Community searches for missing 9-year-old. FBI joins hunt for Sophia Whitmore. The photos showed a girl with dark hair and bright eyes, wearing a school uniform in some shots, casual clothes in others. A girl who smiled at the camera with the unself-conscious joy of someone who'd never known real fear. Maya clicked through article after article, reading details that felt both foreign and eerily familiar. Sophia Whitmore had lived with her grandmother after her parents, Eleanor's daughter and son-in-law, had died in a car accident when Sophia was 5. Eleanor had raised her alone, a 2nd-grade teacher suddenly thrust into the role of primary guardian to a traumatized child. By all accounts, they'd been close. Eleanor had walked Sophia to and from school every day, had never let her out of sight, had been fiercely protective. Until September 23, 2011. A Friday. Sophia had stayed after school for art club. Eleanor, who had had a doctor's appointment she couldn't reschedule, had arranged for Sophia to walk home with her best friend, Lily Chen, and Lily's mother. But when Mrs. Chen had gone to collect the girls from the art room, Sophia wasn't there. The art teacher said Sophia had left early, said she'd forgotten something and needed to run home. But Sophia had never arrived home. She'd never been seen again. The search had been massive. Volunteers had combed the woods surrounding the school. Police had interviewed everyone who'd been in the building that day. The FBI had investigated the possibility of abduction, had looked into registered sex offenders in the area, had followed leads that went nowhere. For months, Eleanor Whitmore's face had been on the local news, pleading for information, begging whoever had taken her granddaughter to bring her home. Before we continue with what happens next, if you're finding this story gripping, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who loves a powerful story. Your support keeps these stories coming. Now, back to Maya's discovery. But there had been no ransom demand, no body, no evidence of what had happened to Sophia Grace Whitmore. She had simply vanished, like smoke, like a ghost, leaving behind a devastated grandmother and a community that had eventually, inevitably, moved on to other tragedies, other headlines. Maya closed the laptop, her hands shaking slightly. She walked to her bathroom, barely more than a closet with a toilet, sink, and narrow shower, and stared at herself in the mirror. Dark hair, though she dyed it lighter, and then darker again several times over the years. Dark eyes. The small beauty mark above her left eyebrow that she'd once considered having removed but never had. A face she'd tried to forget, to reshape into something new, someone new. She thought about her earliest memories, the ones that felt more like dreams than reality. Running through woods, branches catching at her clothes. The smell of exhaust and cigarettes in a car that drove too fast down dark roads. A motel room with stained carpet and a TV that only got 3 channels. A woman with stringy hair and manic energy who'd called herself Aunt Carrie and had told Maya, no, told Sophia, that her grandmother didn't want her anymore, that they were going on an adventure, that everything would be fine if she just stayed quiet and did what she was told. Maya had been 11 when she'd finally escaped Carrie during a gas station stop in Tennessee. She'd hidden in the bathroom, climbed out the window, run until her lungs burned. She told the police she didn't know her last name, couldn't remember where she was from, and had been so traumatized that the details were fuzzy. They believed her because children who'd been through trauma often couldn't remember. She'd been placed in foster care, had run from 3 different homes before aging out at 18. She'd kept moving, kept changing her name, kept building walls between who she was and who she'd been. And now, 14 years later, an old woman had looked at her in a diner and seen through all of it in an instant. Maya's phone, a cheap prepaid model, buzzed on the table. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her swipe to accept. Hello. Is this Maya Rodriguez? A woman's voice, professional, slightly clipped. Yes. Who's this? This is Susan Chen. I'm calling from Millbrook General Hospital. You were present when Eleanor Whitmore collapsed this afternoon at the Bluebell Diner? Maya's throat went dry. Is she okay? She's stable. She had a cardiac episode, stress-induced, but she's going to recover. However, she's been asking for you. She's quite insistent, actually, and the doctors think it might help her blood pressure if we can fulfill her request. Would you be willing to come to the hospital? I know it's an unusual ask. I'll come, Maya heard herself say. Which room? She wrote down the information, ended the call, and stood in the center of her apartment, caught between the person she'd been trying to become and the ghost of who she used to be. Every instinct she'd honed over 14 years screamed at her to pack the car and leave, to be gone by sunrise, to disappear the way she'd disappeared so many times before. But she thought about Eleanor Whitmore's face in that moment of recognition. She thought about the photograph of a little girl who'd gone missing and a grandmother who'd spent 14 years not knowing what had happened to her. She thought about the name that Eleanor's lips had formed, Sophia. Maya grabbed her jacket and her car keys. The drive to Millbrook General took 12 minutes. The hospital was small, built in the 1960s and expanded several times since, a maze of wings and apartments that smelled like antiseptic and floor wax. She followed the signs to the cardiac care unit, took the elevator to the 3rd floor, and found herself standing outside room 314, her heart hammering against her ribs. Through the window in the door, she could see Eleanor Whitmore propped up in the hospital bed, oxygen tubing in her nose, monitors beeping softly around her, and 4 drip connected to her left arm. She looked small against the white sheets, fragile in a way she hadn't seemed in the diner, despite her age. But her eyes were open, and they were fixed on the door as if she'd been waiting, watching, knowing that Maya would come. Maya pushed the door open and stepped inside. Eleanor's face transformed, crumpling with an emotion so raw and overwhelming that Maya had to look away. Sophia, Eleanor breathed, and the name was a prayer, a hope, a 14-year accumulation of grief contained in 2 syllables. Oh my God. Sophia, is it really you? My name is Maya, Maya said, but her voice came out wrong, uncertain, like she was trying to convince herself as much as Eleanor. Maya Rodriguez. I'm sorry, I think you've confused me with someone else. Come here, Eleanor interrupted, her voice stronger now despite her fragile state.
Please.
Come closer. Maya's feet moved before her brain could catch up, carrying her to the bedside. Eleanor reached out with a trembling hand, and Maya found herself taking it, feeling the papery texture of elderly skin, the cool temperature of fingers that had lost circulation, the desperate strength in Eleanor's grip. The mark, Eleanor whispered, her free hand reaching up to touch Maya's face, fingertips brushing just above her left eyebrow. Sophia had a beauty mark right there, just like yours. And your eyes. Oh, sweetheart, I'd know those eyes anywhere. They're my daughter's eyes. Your mother's eyes. Maya wanted to pull away, wanted to deny it, wanted to maintain the walls she'd built so carefully. But something in her was crumbling, foundations she'd thought were solid suddenly revealing themselves as sand. I don't remember. You loved butterflies, Eleanor said, words tumbling out in a rush now, as if she'd been storing them for 14 years and could finally release them. You collected them, pictures and models. Your favorite color was purple. You hated green beans but loved carrots. You had a stuffed rabbit named Mr. Hoppy that you couldn't sleep without. You wanted to be a veterinarian when you grew up because you loved animals more than anything. Eleanor's eyes were streaming tears now, but she was smiling, and the smile was breaking and beautiful all at once. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you don't remember any of that. Maya opened her mouth to do exactly that, to deny it all, to protect herself the way she'd learned to protect herself. But instead, a memory surfaced, unbidden and sharp. Purple walls in a bedroom filled with afternoon light. A butterfly mobile hanging above a bed, casting moving shadows. The soft texture of worn velvet under her fingers, a rabbit's ear, held close against her chest, while a gentle voice read stories about magical lands and brave children. Mr. Hoppy, Maya whispered, and the name unlocked something inside her that she'd kept sealed for so long she'd almost convinced herself it didn't exist. He had one ear that was shorter than the other, because I used to chew on it when I was little. Eleanor's sob was audible, her whole body shaking with it.
Yes.
Yes, that's right. Oh, Sophia, what happened to you? Where have you been? I looked for you, I never stopped looking. And then the door burst open, and the moment shattered. The nurse who entered was middle-aged, efficient, with kind eyes that immediately assessed the situation. Mrs. Whitmore, your blood pressure is spiking. I'm going to have to ask your visitor to step out for now. Eleanor's grip on Maya's hand tightened with surprising strength.
No. Please.
I just found her. I just got her back. And you'll get more time with her, I promise, the nurse said gently but firmly. But not if you have another cardiac episode. Your heart needs rest, Eleanor. You know this. She looked at Maya with an expression that was part understanding, part warning. You can come back tomorrow during visiting hours. 9 to 8. Maya felt the pressure of Eleanor's fingers, saw the desperation in her face, and made a decision that went against every survival instinct she'd cultivated. I'll be back tomorrow, she promised. I'm not going anywhere. We both need some time. Eleanor searched Maya's face, looking for truth or lies, and must have found something believable because she finally released her grip. Tomorrow, she repeated, making it sound like both a question and a command. Tomorrow, Maya confirmed and let herself be ushered out of the room. She made it to her car before the shaking started. She sat in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel, engine off, staring at the hospital's illuminated windows while her mind raced through years of carefully constructed identity, watching it all unravel. Maya Rodriguez, who worked at a diner and lived above a dry cleaner and had no past worth mentioning. That person was dissolving, and in her place, something older and more frightening was emerging. Sophia Grace Whitmore, a little girl who'd disappeared and who maybe, possibly, had been found. She started the car and drove, not back to her apartment but out of town, following dark country roads until she found a pull-off near a lake. She parked and sat in the silence, windows down, breathing the cool night air that smelled of water and decaying leaves. This was what she did when she needed to think, when the walls of her small life felt too confining. She found open spaces and sat with her thoughts until they arranged themselves into something manageable. But tonight, the thoughts wouldn't organize. They tumbled over each other, fragments of memory mixing with years of careful forgetting. She remembered purple walls and butterfly mobiles, but she also remembered the back seat of a car that smelled like cigarettes and desperation. She remembered a gentle voice reading bedtime stories, and she remembered a harsh voice telling her that her grandmother had given her away, that she was a burden, that she should be grateful anyone wanted her at all.
Carrie.
The woman who'd taken her. Maya had pieced together what had happened over the years through research and fuzzy memories. Carrie had been someone peripheral to her life, a teacher's aide at the elementary school, someone with access to children, someone who'd wanted a daughter and had seen an opportunity in a little girl who stayed late for art club. Someone who'd been smart enough to avoid immediate suspicion but not smart enough to evade the law forever. Except she had evaded it in a way. Maya had escaped before the authorities had made the connection. She'd told the police in Tennessee a partial truth, that she'd been taken by a woman, that she'd been moved from place to place, but she'd claimed not to remember her real name, her hometown, the details that would have led them back to Millbrook and Eleanor Whitmore. Because by then, after 2 years of being told that her grandmother didn't want her, that going back meant punishment and institutions, Maya had believed it. She'd been 11 years old and traumatized and convinced that moving forward, becoming someone new, was safer than trying to go back to a past that might not want her. So she let the system process her as Jane Doe until they'd given up trying to identify her. She'd been placed with foster families who'd meant well but hadn't been able to reach the quiet, withdrawn girl who'd already learned to trust no one. She'd run from homes that felt too confining, too questioning. She'd survived by being invisible, by working cash jobs, by moving before anyone could get too curious about who she was or where she'd come from. And now, a random Tuesday afternoon had destroyed 14 years of careful anonymity. Maya pulled out her phone and did something she rarely did. She searched for herself. Not Maya Rodriguez, but Sophia Grace Whitmore. The articles she found were heartbreaking in their detail. The intensive search efforts that had lasted months. The reward money, $50,000, that had been offered for information. The anniversary stories that had run every year for the first 5 years, then sporadically after that, keeping the case alive in public memory. The interviews with Eleanor, who had spoken to reporters even when the police had advised her not to, who had made plea after plea for her granddaughter's safe return. There were photos of Eleanor throughout the years, aging from a woman in her 60s to the elderly woman Maya had seen today. In the early photos, Eleanor looked haggard, destroyed by grief. In later ones, she looked older but composed, like someone who'd learned to carry an unbearable weight without collapsing under it. Until today. Until she'd looked up in a diner and seen her missing granddaughter serving coffee. Maya found a video from 3 years ago, a local news segment marking the 11th anniversary of Sophia's disappearance. Eleanor stood in what was clearly her living room, surrounded by photos of Sophia at various ages, school pictures, birthday parties, candid shots that captured a happy child. Eleanor spoke directly to the camera, her voice steady, but her eyes haunted. "I know she's out there somewhere," Eleanor said in the video. "I know it in my bones, in my heart. Sophia, if you can hear this, if someone is showing you this, I love you. I have always loved you. There is nothing you could do or say or be that would change that. You are wanted. You are missed. You are loved beyond measure. And if you can find your way home, I will be here waiting. I will always be here waiting." Maya closed the video, her eyes burning. She sat in her car by the lake until midnight, until the cold drove her back to her apartment, where she lay on her mattress fully clothed and didn't sleep. The next morning, she called Pete at the diner. "I need a few days off," she said without preamble. Pete was quiet for a moment. "What happened yesterday? With that lady?" "Yes." Another pause. "Are you in some kind of trouble, Maya?" The question hit deeper than Pete probably intended. "I don't know yet," Maya answered honestly. "But I need to figure it out."
Take the week, Pete said.
You're the best waitress I've got, and you've never asked for time off. You've earned it. Just keep me posted, all right? Let me know you're okay. The unexpected kindness in his voice made Maya's throat tight. Thank you. She spent the morning cleaning her apartment with manic energy, scrubbing surfaces that were already clean, organizing possessions that didn't need organizing. It was a displacement activity, and she knew it, but she couldn't make herself stop. At noon, she showered, changed into clean jeans and a sweater, and drove to the hospital. Eleanor was sitting up in bed when Maya arrived, looking remarkably better than she had the night before. Her color was good, her eyes were bright, and when Maya knocked softly on the door frame, Eleanor's face split into a smile so radiant it was almost painful to witness. You came, Eleanor breathed. You actually came. I was so afraid I dreamed it, or that you'd. She stopped herself, pressed her lips together. Come in. Please sit down. Maya entered hesitantly, taking the chair beside the bed. In the daylight, she could see Eleanor more clearly. The fine network of wrinkles around her eyes, the age spots on her hands, the thinness of her arms where they emerged from the hospital gown. But she could also see the strength in her posture, the intelligence in her gaze, the determination that had kept her searching for 14 years. The doctors say I can go home tomorrow, Eleanor said, her words coming quickly, as if she was afraid silence would give Maya time to run. It was a stress-induced, cardiac episode. My heart is actually quite strong for my age. They want to monitor me one more night, but then I'm cleared to leave. I've already arranged for my neighbor, Margaret, to pick me up. I'll pick you up, Maya heard herself say. Eleanor stopped mid-sentence, staring at her. You will?
If you want me to.
Maya struggled with the words. I don't know what this is yet. I don't know what will happen next. But I think I need to figure it out. And I can't do that by running away. Running away, Eleanor repeated softly. Is that what you've been doing? All these years? Maya nodded, unable to speak past the sudden tightness in her throat. Tell me, Eleanor said gently. Tell me what happened, Sophia.
Please.
I've imagined so many terrible things. My name is Maya, Maya interrupted, more sharply than she intended. I've been Maya for 6 years. Before that I was other people, other names. I don't know how to be Sophia anymore. I don't even know if I remember how. Eleanor absorbed this, her expression shifting through several emotions before settling on something that looked like understanding. Then I'll call you Maya. If that's who you need to be right now, that's who you are. But Maya, I need to know, are you her? Are you my Sophia? It was the question Maya had been avoiding since the moment Eleanor had first looked at her in the diner. She could still deny it. She could claim it was a coincidence, a case of mistaken identity, and walk away. Eleanor would believe her or wouldn't, but Maya could preserve the life she'd built, keep running, stay safe in her anonymity. But when she opened her mouth, what came out was, I think so. I remember pieces. A purple room. A stuffed rabbit. Your voice. Reading stories. But it's mixed up with other things, darker things, and I can't always tell what's real and what I've made up to fill in the gaps. Eleanor reached out, her hand shaking slightly, and Maya took it. Tell me about the darker things, Eleanor said. If you can. I won't push, but I need to understand what happened to you. Who took you? So Maya told her, haltingly at first, then with increasing speed as the memories spilled out, memories she'd tried so hard to bury but had never quite managed to forget. She told Eleanor about Carrie, about the car rides and the motel rooms and the constant moving, about being told that her grandmother had given her up, that she was unwanted, that running away was the only option, about escaping in Tennessee and being too afraid to tell the truth, about the foster homes and the years of drifting and the careful construction of a life built on lies and partial truths. Eleanor listened without interrupting, tears streaming silently down her face, her hand gripping Maya's like a lifeline. When Maya finally finished, exhausted by the telling, Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. Her name was Carrie Simpson, Eleanor finally said, her voice rough with suppressed emotion. She was a teacher's aide at your school. The police questioned her along with everyone else who'd been in the building that day, but she had an alibi, claimed she'd left before you did, had witnesses who placed her elsewhere. They cleared her and moved on to other suspects. Eleanor's jaw tightened. If we'd known she'd taken you. It's not your fault, Maya said, surprised by how much she meant it. She was smart. She knew how to avoid suspicion. Do you know what happened to her? After you escaped? Maya shook her head. I never looked. I was too afraid that finding her would somehow lead back to me, to questions I didn't want to answer. I just wanted to forget. She's dead, Eleanor said flatly. She died 7 years ago. Car accident in South Carolina. The police never connected her to your disappearance. She got away with it. The bitterness in Eleanor's voice was sharp as broken glass. She took you, kept you for 2 years, and then died without anyone knowing what she'd done. The information settled over Maya like a weight.
Carrie was dead.
The woman who'd stolen her childhood, who'd lied to her, who'd made her believe she was unwanted. She was gone. Maya wasn't sure what she felt about that. Relief, maybe. Anger that justice had never been served. An odd emptiness at the loss of the only person who could have confirmed Maya's memories, who could have answered the questions that still lingered. I'm sorry I didn't find you sooner, Eleanor said, her voice breaking. I'm sorry you went through all of that alone. I'm sorry you thought I didn't want you. Sophia, Maya, you have to understand, not a single day passed that I didn't think about you. Not one. I kept your room exactly as you left it. I kept hoping, waiting, believing that somehow you'd come home. Maya felt something crack inside her, a defensive wall she'd maintained for so long it had become part of her architecture. I don't know how to come home, she whispered. I don't know how to be that person anymore. That little girl, she's gone. She's been gone for a long time. Then we'll figure out who you are now, Eleanor said firmly.
Together. If you'll let me.
I'm not asking you to turn back time, or pretend the last 14 years didn't happen. I'm just asking for a chance to get to know you. This version of you. The person you've become. Maya looked at Eleanor's face, lined with age and grief, but also hope, stubborn and bright despite everything. And she thought about her apartment above the dry cleaner, about how easy it would be to pack her car and disappear again. But she also thought about 14 years of running, of hiding, of being no one. Okay, Maya said quietly. Let's try. At 23, she built a life of deliberate obscurity in Millbrook, working as a waitress at Pete's Diner. But her carefully constructed anonymity shatters when Eleanor Whitmore, a regular customer, suffers a cardiac episode at the diner and, in her semi-conscious state, calls Maya by a different name, Sophia. The name triggers something Maya has spent over a decade suppressing, fragmented memories of a childhood she's worked hard to forget. Eleanor recognizes her immediately. The unusual amber-flecked eyes, the distinctive beauty mark, the features that match those of her granddaughter, who vanished 14 years ago at age 9. Maya's instinct is to run, to disappear before the situation becomes complicated, but something keeps her tethered. Perhaps curiosity, perhaps the pull of buried memories, perhaps the desperation in Eleanor's voice. At the hospital, Eleanor explains what Maya has tried so hard not to remember. Sophia Grace Whitmore was abducted from her elementary school by a woman named Carrie Simpson, who posed as a family friend and convinced the 9-year-old that her grandmother no longer wanted her. For 2 years, Sophia lived in various motels and apartments across several states, while Carrie moved frequently, always staying ahead of authorities, feeding the child lies about being unwanted and forgotten. At 11, Sophia escaped during a brief moment when Carrie left her alone in a Tennessee motel. Traumatized and half-believing Carrie's lies, she told authorities she was an orphan with no family to return to. The foster care system absorbed her, and she deliberately obscured her past, afraid that remembering would somehow lead her back to Carrie. She changed her name to Maya Rodriguez at 18 and has been drifting ever since, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. Eleanor has never stopped searching. For 14 years, she maintained Sophia's bedroom exactly as it was, attended vigils, pestered police, and refused to accept that her granddaughter was gone forever. The house on Sycamore Lane is a shrine to hope, walls covered in photos, a purple bedroom waiting, a stuffed rabbit named Mr. Hoppy sitting on the pillow. Maya agrees to visit Eleanor after her hospital discharge, driven by a mixture of guilt, curiosity, and the uncomfortable stirring of memories she can no longer fully suppress. Walking into the yellow house with white trim unlocks something in her. She remembers the porch with hanging flowers, the kitchen that smelled like baking, the feeling of being safe and loved. In Sophia's unchanged bedroom, she picks up Mr. Hoppy and remembers taking him to school for show and tell, having him in her backpack the day Carrie took her, crying when she lost him at a motel in Georgia. The reunion is tentative, fragile. Maya can't simply become Sophia again. That child died somewhere in the back of Carrie's car or in a series of anonymous motel rooms. But she can't entirely be Maya either, not with these memories flooding back, not with Eleanor's gentle persistence chipping away at her defenses. She stays the night on Eleanor's couch, unable to sleep in the purple room but unwilling to completely walk away. Maya contacts Detective James Morrison and reports information about the cold case. The next morning, she and Eleanor go to the police station to give DNA samples and formal statements. Morrison reveals that Carrie Simpson died 7 years ago in a car accident and was never connected to Sophia's disappearance because she had alibis. The wheels of official investigation begin turning. DNA tests ordered, case files reopened, the FBI likely to become involved. Before they can even leave the station, the story begins to leak. Kevin Chen, reporter from the local Millbrook Gazette, shows up at Eleanor's house, having heard through the small-town grapevine that Sophia Whitmore may have been found. Maya angrily sends him away, but she knows he represents just the beginning. Once the DNA results confirm her identity, the media circus will begin in earnest. Missing girl found after 14 years. It's the kind of human interest story that goes viral, that draws national attention, that turns private trauma into public entertainment. Maya's immediate reaction is to plan her escape. She can be packed and gone within hours, disappear into another state with another name, leave both Maya Rodriguez and Sophia Whitmore behind. It's what she's always done when situations become too complicated, too vulnerable, too real. But Pete, her boss at the diner, stops by her apartment. He's figured out who she is and offers simple wisdom. She should think about what she's running from. She has a grandmother who loves her, who never stopped looking, who wants her in her life. That's not nothing. Margaret, Eleanor's neighbor, texts to say Eleanor is worried about her. The message sits on Maya's phone like a weight, like a tether, like an anchor that might either drag her down or keep her from drifting away entirely. Maya stared at the text from Margaret for a long time before her thumbs moved across the screen. I'm okay. Tell her I'll see her tomorrow. She sent it before she could second-guess herself, then immediately wanted to take it back. But the message was delivered, and somewhere next door to Eleanor's house, Margaret would be reading it, probably walking over to share the news with Eleanor, who would smile that patient, hopeful smile and believe that her granddaughter was really coming back. That night, Maya dreamed of butterflies. Hundreds of them, monarchs with their distinctive orange and black wings, filling a classroom where a 9-year-old girl sat painting watercolors. The butterflies landed on her paper, her hands, her hair, and she laughed with pure joy. Then the dream shifted, and she was older, still painting, but the butterflies were behind glass now, pinned and labeled, beautiful but dead. She woke gasping, unsure which version was worse. The week that followed was surreal. Maya went to work at the diner, where everyone suddenly knew who she was and treated her with a mixture of curiosity and careful kindness. She visited Eleanor every evening, slowly allowing herself to remember more, to bridge the gap between Sophia and Maya. They cooked together, Eleanor teaching her recipes that sparked sense memories of flour-dusted counters and the taste of cookie dough stolen when no one was looking. They watched old home videos, and Maya saw herself as a gap-toothed child, uninhibited and trusting, so different from the guarded woman she'd become. Detective Morrison called on day 5. DNA results are back. It's a match. You're Sophia Grace Whitmore. Maya sat down hard on Eleanor's couch, even though she'd known this was coming. Official confirmation felt different than assumption. It felt final, irrevocable. What happens now? I'll need you to come in for a formal interview. The FBI wants to reopen the investigation into Carrie Simpson's network. We think she may have been part of a larger operation. And there's going to be media attention. I can't stop that, but I can give you fair warning. The story breaks tomorrow morning in the Gazette, and it'll spread from there. He was right. Kevin Chen's article appeared online at 6 a.m. the next day, complete with side-by-side photos. 9-year-old Sophia from a school picture and a recent photo of Maya that someone had taken outside the diner. The headline read, "Millbrook's missing daughter, Sophia Whitmore found after 14 years." By noon, national news outlets had picked it up. By evening, there were reporters camped outside Eleanor's house and Maya's apartment building. Maya's phone rang constantly with numbers she didn't recognize. Someone found her email and filled her inbox with interview requests. A producer from a morning talk show offered to fly them both to New York. A true crime podcaster wanted exclusive access to her story. Maya did what she'd always done when overwhelmed. She disappeared. Not literally this time. She couldn't leave Eleanor to face the media alone, but she shut down, went quiet, retreated into herself. She stopped answering her phone. She stayed in Eleanor's house with the curtains drawn, avoiding the windows where telephoto lenses might capture her image. Eleanor gave a brief statement to the press. "We are grateful that Sophia has been found and ask for privacy during this time of healing and reunion. We will not be granting interviews." Then she unplugged her landline and joined Maya in self-imposed isolation. "This is what you were afraid of," Eleanor said on the third day of their siege, as they ate sandwiches in the dim living room while reporters knocked on the door periodically. The attention, the exposure, the loss of control. "Yes," Maya admitted. "And now that it's happening, how do you feel?" Maya considered the question honestly. Trapped. Angry. Violated. But also, she struggled to find the word. "Less alone than I expected. You're here. Pete's been texting to make sure I'm okay. Margaret brings food and runs interference with reporters. Detective Morrison calls every day to update me on the investigation. Even some of the customers from the diner have sent messages of support. I thought being exposed would destroy me, but instead I'm seeing that maybe having people know who I am isn't the same as being vulnerable to harm." "That's growth," Eleanor said gently. "Or Stockholm Syndrome," Maya replied, but she was half smiling. The media frenzy peaked and then, as these things do, began to fade. A celebrity scandal drew attention elsewhere. A natural disaster dominated news cycles. Within 2 weeks, the reporters outside had dwindled from a dozen to 2 to none. The story became yesterday's news, archived and mostly forgotten except by those directly involved. Maya gave one interview, carefully controlled, to a journalist Eleanor trusted. She told her story on her terms: the abduction, the years with Carrie, the escape, the foster care system, the deliberate forgetting. She didn't sensationalize it, didn't cry on camera, didn't perform grief for viewers' consumption. She was honest and factual, and when the interviewer pushed for more emotion, more drama, Maya simply said, "This isn't entertainment. This is my life. I'm sharing it once, and then I'm done." The FBI investigation into Carrie Simpson revealed that she had likely abducted at least 2 other children over the years, though both had been recovered within months. Maya's case was unique in its duration, in Carrie's ability to keep a child hidden for 2 years, in Sophia's ultimate escape and subsequent disappearance into the system. The investigation brought painful details to light, but also provided closure. Carrie was dead. She couldn't hurt anyone else. The case could finally be closed. Through all of this, Maya kept working at the diner. Pete had offered her time off, but she needed the routine, the normalcy, the simple act of pouring coffee and taking orders. The regular customers treated her mostly the same, with perhaps a bit more kindness, a bit more patience. She appreciated them for not making a spectacle of her pain. And slowly, carefully, she began to let herself imagine a future that didn't involve running. She looked at apartments in Millbrook, not because her current place was inadequate, but because she wanted to choose where to live rather than just accepting whatever was available and temporary. She considered taking classes at the community college, maybe studying art or psychology or something that interested her beyond mere survival. She started seeing a therapist, working through trauma that had been buried for over a decade. Most importantly, she began to integrate the two halves of herself. She wasn't entirely Maya, wasn't entirely Sophia, but something new, a woman who'd survived the unthinkable and was learning, slowly, to build a life rather than just endure one. 3 months after that day in the diner when Eleanor had whispered Sophia, Maya stood in the purple bedroom and finally understood what Eleanor had been preserving all these years. It wasn't a shrine to a dead child or a time capsule of denial. It was a promise kept, a light left on, a door left unlocked. It was 14 years of unconditional love manifested in paint and stuffed animals and unchanged furniture. "I want to redecorate," Maya told Eleanor that evening. "Not erase Sophia. I could never do that, and I don't want to. But make it mine now. Make it a room for who I am, not who I was." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "I think that's perfect." They painted the walls a soft gray-blue together, kept some elements, Mr. Hoppy, of course, and the bookshelves, and a few favorite childhood drawings in new frames. But they added new things too. Maya's sketchbook, her laptop, photos from her years away that she'd previously kept hidden. They merged past and present, Sophia and Maya, creating something that honored both. "Are you staying?" Eleanor asked one night, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies. "In Millbrook, I mean. You don't have to, you know. I'll understand if you need to leave, to start fresh somewhere else." Maya thought about Pete's steady presence, about Margaret's kindness, about the therapist who was helping her untangle years of trauma, about this house that smelled like home and hurt in equal measure. She thought about running, how easy it would be, how familiar. And she thought about staying, how terrifying it was, how necessary. "I'm staying," Maya said. "Not because I have to. Not out of guilt or obligation. But because I want to. Because maybe it's time to stop running from my past and start building a future." Eleanor reached over and took her hand, squeezed gently. "Your parents would be so proud of the woman you've become. I'm proud of you." Maya squeezed back, watching the fireflies dance in the gathering darkness, and for the first time in 14 years, she felt something she'd thought she'd lost forever. She felt like she was home. She was 23 years old, and she had survived. Not just the abduction, not just the years of running, but the harder challenge of stopping, of staying, of allowing herself to be known and loved. She was Sophia and Maya and someone entirely new, a woman who'd learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't to run away from your pain, but to turn and face it, to integrate it, to let it transform you without letting it destroy you. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be hard days, triggering memories, moments when the urge to flee would be overwhelming. But she wouldn't be facing them alone. She had Eleanor. She had Pete and Margaret and Detective Morrison and a slowly expanding circle of people who knew her story and cared about her anyway. She was found. Not just physically, but in all the ways that mattered. Found by someone who'd never stopped looking, by a love that had survived 14 years of absence and grief. And in being found, she was finally learning how to find herself. The fireflies blinked their silent messages into the night, and Maya sat on the porch of the yellow house with white trim, holding her grandmother's hand, and knew with quiet certainty that she was exactly where she needed to be. She was home. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.